Perfect.
Low,
Sounds good, man. I'm following your lead.
yes, low fidelity views. Here we are on this very hackney DIY setup and OBS, but we're getting it done, folks. All right. So, what is this about? Now, I already just talked here with Ivan, my co-host, at least this go around, who I'm going to introduce here in a second. Those of you who are on my Facebook page and stuff, you saw that I posted about generating or starting up this podcast or at least these series of conversations because it is going to come to an end. Things become transient. My life changes, your life changes, and maybe this moment in time is not going to be relevant 3 or 4 years from now. But the point is for now, we're going to be having these conversations. And what I wanted to do with this series is kind of reboot what I was doing with the Exchanges podcast. Now, that stuff is still out there on YouTube. So if you want to go look at it, the Exchanges podcast with a period, you can find it out there. You can still find it on Apple, iTunes, and some of the other podcasting platforms out there. But in that podcast series, I sat down with a group of everyday people out there living their lives and coming together and talking about politics, current events, and culture and the things pretty much of our times, exchanging ideas. That was that original podcast series. And it started out of, now, I could be wrong. I know I'm going to share with some people who used to be on that podcast, but I feel like it started when Trump was first elected. That was like the genesis of let's get together and figure out, let's talk with each other about some topics. So that was around circa 2016 that started. But once again, life changed. I dropped that. I'm doing some other stuff with Dungeons and Dragons on the side on another stream, D&D Basement Party. You can check that out if you're interested in that type of content. But I dropped the politics things for a while, started living my life, doing a bunch of, things. As you can see, I'm just like most people out here. I am in my bedroom, it's blurred out. I am chilling. There's no desk or cool CGI shit going on in the background. Point is, like right now, then I'll just live my everyday life. And we all, if you're alive today and you are a citizen of the United States, this political season was unescapable. So all of us got to go ahead and have, at least in a grand scheme of things, pretty close front row seats to positions of power, and how that kind of affects the rest of the world. And we got to see that Donald J. Trump, uh, very much, Ivan, in like you almost can't write this content. And you could talk, Ivan. I mean, like you could pipe in here, even though I'm kind of laying the groundwork. But
All right.
this season of like the United States of America 2024 has been riveting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's definitely entertaining. I pretty much, with the polarization of the whole country, I would say politics is on the tip of everybody's tongues right now, or I should say before the election. And I feel like now everybody's trying to detox off of it.
True. Everybody is trying to detox all. You can feel it. You feel like, for the most part, people aren't having those high charged conversations. A lot of the bots in the social media ecosystem has like dissipated and disappeared. It's a bit quieter out there in the field and stuff now. Because for a minute there, it's like any social media platform you got on. I feel like, well, mainly X or Twitter's that I'm talking about. If you like peeked into that world there, it was just a dumpster fire of politics. It was just non-stop trench warfare on all sides when it came to like politics and issues. Now, if you hopped into like Facebook or Instagram or stuff, it was a bit more quieter. I guess Mark Zuckerberg decided to, um, keep the doors locked in that ecosystem, but it's still unescapable. Your friends, everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned my lesson at a young age not to fight on the internet, especially via text. Because you're emotionally charging yourself for what, and to what end. What are you going to gain? So yeah, I learned my lesson a while back.
100%. But anyway, back to this kind of train of thought that I was going through here is that we have, considering what has just happened in politics, it feels like a reason for me to come back and talk about this stuff in a public space, considering everything that was going on. I am glad that this first conversation here didn't happen so close to the end of the election. I feel like, just like you said, Ivan, it's like we needed a period to, like, just detox a little bit to
Yep.
kind of settle into a new environment before going off the rip and saying this, that, and this. But I don't know. Maybe we'll go ahead and get into some of that. But anyway, so that's the genesis of this series of conversations. It's going to be with a variety of people. I have thank you to those folks who've DM'd me, and I have a short list of people in which I want to go ahead and get on a regular rotation. But Ivan here is an acquaintance of mine from that original podcast series, or at least around that time period when I was doing it, where we both found ourselves connected by showing up to this meetup group where people talk politics and culture and society and everything. And then we disappeared, and here we are now back again. So the last time I think we're going to say 2016, somewhere in there, maybe 2015 was the last time we really interacted. So there was a gulf of time between back then and like right now. And I want each of us to kind of like track that, Ivan. So before we get into that, though, just really quickly, just tell us, very generally, who you are, um, what you want us to know about you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would just say I'm just like a regular suburban dad now at this age. Just turned my birthday's tomorrow. I turned 31. Got 3 kids. Um, and I, in terms of my ideological background, I grew up pretty a-religious. I would say my parents were very democratic growing up. And it wasn't really until my senior year of high school before I started forming my own worldviews. And then since then, it's been quite literally a roller coaster. And it's extremely fun. And I really enjoy engaging in discourse like this. I enjoy disagreeing. I enjoy disagreeing respectfully. Or if you want to get heated and fight, we can fight. I'm down for that too.
ooh, we can throw some this. I can type in all caps too. You know. All right, bet. Yeah. So before we kind of jump into the period between 2016 to 2024, about to be 2025, I kind of want to start with us tracking a bit of the stuff that you said there, Ivan. Right? That right now you consider yourself a suburban father. You're working. You became politically conscious kind of in your high school, era, and
Yep.
I want to try to pull out some bits and pieces of that past time period and maybe how that led to your current political consciousness, right? Let's try to make like a dirty roadmap of how of why you believe and think the things that you think now, right? Okay. So, but I'm gonna start with myself. So, um, I feel like I became politically conscious. And now feel free to jump in here and ask me some questions if you want, or we can die. We can go ahead and walk off on some tangent. We got a bit of time. So, but I became political conscious, I believe, when I realized Bill Clinton got head in the White House. That's when I think I became politically conscious. I don't know, like, if you don't want to share your age, that's fine. But folks, I'm 39. I'm almost 40. So when I was in, oh man, this had to be elementary school, maybe middle school. It's hard. It's foggy. But those of you who are around my age, I'm telling you, there was this time period where you were in school and people were like, Bill Clinton got the Lewinsky, and you were like, what are you talking about? Like, what is Bill Clinton, okay, that's the president. What is a Lewinsky? And then, eventually you piece it together. And then me as a kid, you realize that, wait a minute, the president of the country I live in, the person I've been told is is the defining power, the face of the United States was, getting some head in the Oval Office and lying about it too. It turned into a circus of a thing. That was to me felt like I became aware of like, okay, there's something else going on out here in the world. They're like outside of my school and Ninja Turtles and Legos and being a '90s kid. There's like there's things happening, and these things are kind of absurd. Another point around the same time period. Actually, Ivan, how old were you? Do you remember when Bill Clinton we all found out that he had sexual relations with that woman in
Yeah,
office.
dude, I had to been a little kid. I was born in '93, so I mean, I think what was his presidency, like late '80s, early '90s?
Late, oh man, I'm showing my age, dude. His presidency was through the '90s. He was the '90s president. So '93, '94. I think maybe. Look, this is why I have different dashboards and on my OBS here. We can look it up. Bill Clinton's presidency. So okay, so you came into existence. You popped out of your mom's womb right when Bill Clinton got into office.
Yep.
Okay. So when did the Lewinsky scandal happen? I'm hopping over to Wikipedia. They've got a whole section on this. And it's absurd now in hindsight, but back then, okay, here we go. Alleged affairs. Monica Lewinsky. When did that happen? I want to know how old you were, Ivan, when that happened. Scandal.
Wasn't it his first term?
Yeah, yeah, it was the end of his first term. Because think about it. This was about to me it felt like this was about to sink his second term, like when it came out that this happened. It was the Republicans made this to be so huge. Like, I can't believe he was doing what in the office with who? It was like that type
Yeah.
of audacity was in the mediascape. Fast forward now to 2024, dude, and no one would bat an eye. No one would
Yeah.
care. No one
I
would care.
think I think what Bill Clinton's behavior was standard practice amongst, I would say, elite politicians. But
Mhm.
now, 2024, it's much more readily available. We're seeing scandals in entertainment and music and sports and politics. I think back then it was just kind of a little bit more under the table.
Yeah, it was, but it also felt like the media news cycle. It felt like the media as like this fourth estate in politics didn't cover this type of stuff because they believed that it was not um what's the word I'm looking for? Respectable of the position, of like president of the United States. So it's just like you don't cover it because didn't JFK have like multiple affairs too?
Yeah, yeah,
And nobody really heard. You didn't hear it. It wasn't like there was media back then. There were television stations back then. It wasn't as big, but there were the big newspapers. It didn't feel like that was like on the front page of every single media publication that JFK was doing, all types of crazy stuff, I don't know, blow off hookers' backs or something. You know, you that was not the front lines where I feel like today, excuse me, not today, but when Bill Clinton was in office, it was like a big scandal, a big thing, like it was publicized everywhere. So yeah, like there was a transition into the mindset. But now it's almost like the reverse. Not only are we not really hiding it anymore, we just assume that it's happening, and we don't even care that it's happening. Like Donald Trump says, all types of, he's gonna grab somebody by the what. Nobody bats an eye. We hear of scandals of political, like what was his name, Weiner in New York. Um, him sending
Anthony
like,
Weiner.
yeah, Anthony Weiner, like him sending solicitous messages to people who, I don't know the whole situation. I have to look that up. But regardless, that came out. Well, me, now that I think about it, I could be. I mean, that did sink his political career. That was pretty big for him. But even then, though, it's not like it doesn't feel the same as the whole Bill Clinton scandal. Is what I'm getting at here. But anyway,
Yeah.
between 1995 and 1997 is when Monica Lewinsky and that whole thing happened. So, man, you were like 3 or 4 years old. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
too busy um, riding in Power Wheels or something, um, while Bill Clinton was getting some nookie. So, okay, I was older. I was born in '85, so I was like 10 years old when this happened. So, like, I was just coming into like the wider world, and I just remember people and kids in school laughing about this, and it was a big joke. And it was a big joke that all the adults, were so outraged by it. Um, but anyway, Bill Clinton was a big moment for me coming into political consciousness, and another was O.J. Simpson. Do you remember this,
Okay.
Ivan?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The murder trial.
What do you feel about the O.J. Simpson like event?
Again, another one before my time. Um, in retrospect, I think now there's a lot more information available, and there's been a lot more interviews and public talking points of him. Um, I mean, yeah, I think he did it.
Yo, didn't he write a book? If I did it, did that happen?
Yeah,
Was that a
yeah.
real thing? Like, come on, dog.
I don't know the reason why he attacked her or why the murder took place. I'm not familiar with the circumstance, but given his, you know, s- athletic and social position, this man's on top of the world. You're in a position where all your dreams are coming true. You're meeting women, you're meeting people, you're rubbing elbows with the upper echelons of society. I'm sure you have that feeling of invincibility, and impunity. And I'm not saying that's a justification for him doing it, but I can absolutely see why. And someone in that position would do it and be able to get away with
True. I mean, they did call him the Juice. The
it.
Juice.
Yeah.
And here's another interesting change over time about this. So when I was a kid, this happened in 1994. That's when he was charged. So once again, you were really young. I was about 10 years old. So you had uh, after OJ, then Bill Clinton popped off. Like these big moments that like reached me as a kid, broke the child barrier, and I remember the saying as a kid: if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Meaning that if OJ's hand didn't fit in these dirty gloves that they found at the crime site, that had the blood of the victims on it, if his hands didn't fit in that glove, that means that he didn't do it. That was his lawyer, famous lawyer. I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time looking it up here. Let's see here. Legal history. This lawyer, Johnny Cochran, he came up with that line: if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. But anyway, um, but from that event, I want to highlight something here. It was a race thing. I know I said I was going to compare this to something I think, a little bit more recent, contemporary. But I remember back then the feeling, me being, a black male in the United States in the '90s, and I grew up in, New Jersey. I was an inner city kid. I lived hood adjacent. My mom She was single parent raising me for at least the first part of my childhood life. We didn't live in the best place and stuff like that, but we were still in the mix socially and culturally. And I remember in school and in other public places and stuff, this being a race thing. People wanted OJ to be found not guilty, to get one up over on the man, was kind of the sentiment that I felt around me at that time, if I look back and process it in hindsight.
Yep.
But yeah, that's kind of what this represented. It was like the first flags of like um there being real racial conflict in society outside of the textbooks and things I was learning in school. So those two early childhood things I think really stick in my mind, that kind of like slowly begin to nudge me out of being asleep into some political consciousness. The next big thing after that, there's just this huge gap where it felt like nothing happened. Things were great. The Backstreet Boys were like touring. Britney Spears was popular. Freaking Cisco was doing the thong song. Like Eminem was at his height. Like things culturally and entertainment wise felt amazing in the 90s. Like if you were a 90s kid, it was fantastic. It was a great period as compared to being a kid in, I don't know, the late 1900s and working in a factory or something. Like the, being a kid in the 90s was really great. So there's this time period, there was this gap. Then 9/11 happened. Ivan, are you there? Uh-oh.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'm listening. I'm listening.
9/11, man. What is your memories of 9/11?
This gonna sound bad, but 9/11 was a good day for me. I
Oh,
was in
snap. I'm going to clip that right there. That's all I'm, no, I'm joking.
I was in second grade.
Hmm.
My teacher, all the teachers are freaking out. They're still putting, the buildings collapsing on the video or on TVs. And I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I thought they were watching a movie or a show. And my parents come pick me up, which never happened.
Mm.
And we got to go home and hang out with my brothers. And it was just like a day my parent picked us up and we hung out at home. I had no concept of like the gravity of 9/11 until I was in high school.
Interesting. So, when in high school do you think, like, what brought 9/11 back into the forefront when you got older, like in high school?
Yeah, that 9/11 in particular, but other things as well. You mentioned a word earlier, Zeitgeist. There's a popular documentary on Netflix called Zeitgeist,
Yes.
where they go over like, high level, I guess you can call it conspiracy theories or just, you know, uh, I guess the way the society operates. And they explain it in a way to me that I had never been presented before. And that shattered my worldview. Well,
Mm.
I would argue I didn't have one at that time.
Mm.
Um, and not having the ability to talk to any adult about that kind of information really threw me for like an intellectual whirlwind. And that documentary specifically initiated my like my my pursuit where I made the decision to pursue information about developing my worldview.
So that's interesting. Um, did you find the Zeitgeist movie close to when it first came out, or did you find it like later? Because when did that documentary
I
series came out?
I saw it in 2000 like 2011, 2012 time frame. I don't know how old it is. But I remember it so clearly, getting home from school, watching the whole documentary kind of like as just like something to do. And I was just so perplexed by the information. I literally just crawled up onto the roof of my house and just stared out and like didn't know what to think for hours. And
Mm.
over the next couple of weeks, I would ask my parents about it. They didn't have any information. I would ask my friends about it. They didn't have any information, and if somebody were to engage, it was nothing more than, oh, well, we don't talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stop here in this area of the conversation for a little bit. Zeitgeist. So you saw it in 2011. I saw it about 3 years prior to when you saw it. I saw that movie when it first came out. It was around like 2007. That's when it came out, and that's when I think I saw it. So at that time period, I was just leaving college, and I was on this track of being a young professional, and by that time period, I made a decision. I wanted to go into journalism. That's what I was looking to do. I wanted to go ahead and I worked at a newspaper for a little bit, but then I tacked to IT. But that's a whole nother point. But the thing is that time period, I was working at a local newspaper. I was looking to move from copy editing into some more hard news writing. I was very socially aware in my own way. I was more activist, I was young in my 20s and stuff, ready to go. Thought I knew a lot about the world. And so I remember in my loft apartment, I had three other roommates, and it was your bachelor pad you can think of, a bunch of college graduates just getting out in the world and stuff. But I remember it was an evening where the guys wasn't around. It was just me, and I had my computer, like a desktop computer, hooked up to our TV, and I was like watching movies. I was like, I was lime wiring or ripping stuff, and watching it on the TV and things like that. And I downloaded Zeitgeist. It was from LimeWire or it was a torrent, one of the two. But that's how I got this thing, and it looked interesting to me, and so I watched it. And I remember, like you, dude. I remember it exposed me to certain patterns of thinking about the world that I was never exposed to before. So it was very like daunting and shocking in that way. Um, Especially the latter part of the movie where, or the documentary, where he went into money systems. You got to think that, and even though you're a little bit younger than me, I think we share the same type of schooling, where in public school, and I would probably even argue in private school, there wasn't any talk about money systems in a concrete way. It was abstract things. You had U.S. economy, and it was like a few sections in your American history book, or your at least that was my high school experience. When I went to college, you can go ahead and obviously, pick your degree. You probably studied economics to a very stronger point. But I'm talking about like public school. When you're younger, there wasn't any of like um talks about these systems, and
Yeah.
it in a way of connecting the system to how it influenced you as an individual. And I feel like Zeitgeist kind of did that. It was a bit conspiratorial, 100%. Um, Especially the first third of that movie, which was, if I recall, it was tracking this idea that Jesus was like um, the same
An
figure
archetype.
and yeah, an archetype throughout history. And it's like, well, um, okay, I mean, that's true, but the movie, if I recall, it's been a long time since I've seen it. The movie made it sound like Jesus was like this one figure that happened to be everywhere, spreading this information. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would, to summarize it, it's almost as if like the archetype of Jesus was copy and pasted multiple times throughout history, suggesting that, Jesus of the Bible was not the first one. It was the Bible was just a regurgitation of prior cultures, essentially.
Yeah, but I guess I got at the time, I got the perspective that Zeitgeist the movie was saying that um, Jesus did come from these older cultures, but there is some deeper, darker, or conspiratorial type of history there, that it was being hidden and not told. That was the impression I got from that first part of that movie. And to this day, I still kind of hand wave that part. But when it went into systems of, economic systems and then the money system and stuff like that, that was really shocking to me. Um, and that movie, or I mean those series, I watched the other two, and the other two wasn't as impactful as the first one to me, like the addendum one. Interesting. I think that dived deeper into like the money systems, if I recall. And
Yep.
I don't even remember what the third one was about, really. I it's from the title. I imagine it was about Zeitgeist turning into like an actual activist organization and stuff. And that's another thing too, Ivan. So around that same time period, after 2007, what happened? The financial crisis happened, right? Um, People were out of work. If you were in my class, you just got out of college and you were looking for a professional job and stuff, there was no work. It was really hard to get a job. If you had one, you kept it. People were struggling. And the Occupy Wall Street movement kind of burst onto the scene.
Yep.
And but I feel like I met a lot of people from the Occupy Wall Street movement that saw this type of content, Zeitgeist, the movie series, and kind of linked them two together. This is all part of like this early beta version of like conspiracy, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I definitely, after that, I dove head deep into, I guess you could say, conspiracy theory type content. A lot of it was valuable. A lot of it isn't. I think the key to consuming conspiracy content is discernment, and not take everything at face value and have some level of sifting information so that you can, organize it in your head and also be able to communicate it to others. So you're not lost in this, you know, where you can't verbalize your worldview, or you come off as too kooky or crazy to other people.
Yeah. Do you feel like Zeitgeist is still relevant today, like this film?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like you said, the historical religious aspect of it, not super important, I would argue, but the government control, monetary control, and the function of our macro socioeconomic is incredibly important now. Now that even more today, um, because I mean now we're all experiencing inflation. Whether we want to agree or we can come to agreement about figures or not, life has become more expensive since COVID. And yeah, I think it's extremely relevant. I would 100% recommend it to anybody listening, or to anybody in the future.
Hear that? Go pick up a copy. Peter Joseph, the Zeitgeist the movie. I do think that like Zeitgeist has made its stamp on early 2000s. What's the word I'm looking for? Political consciousness, I guess we'll continue to use.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people over time have seen or heard about this now, and it's free. That was another thing that I think was kind of innovative at the time. It was like it it was produced very well, and it wasn't asking you for anything. It was like, here's this information, and do
Correct.
with it what you will.
But
But
yeah, that
mhm,
I was actually gonna save that for my portion, kind of where when I explain my develop my worldview, to really
gotcha.
start off with that documentary, and then through college.
Okay, so let me finish this up real quick. I know I've been bouncing. All right, 9/11. That was a big thing for me. That made me real. All right, we moved from like there's powers out there doing crazy stuff. There's a race conflict in my country, and now there is these outsiders. There's these quote unquote people at large who are upset at the United States for very particular reasons that come into view. 9/11 was huge for me. I was in high school, and I remember the homeroom teacher. I think it was no, I think it was in my video production class or something. But the teacher came in and he just turned on the TV. We were all talking and cutting up, and he just turned on the TV and turned it to the news and started watching it. And I remember slowly everybody just started turning and watching the TV, and then yeah, you see like these planes crash into the tower. It was an amazing like sight. It was like at at first it was almost unbelievable. It was just like that must be an accident or something. And then it happened again, and then I remember people started talking, kids started talking, and then fast forward after the news came out about Al Qaeda. And then we fast forward to weapons of mass destruction. Then we fast forward to the media, um, really digging into the inconsistencies with the White House, George W. Bush, and the reasons for going to Iraq and then Afghanistan. By that time, I was just getting in college, and I was paying attention to this stuff. And the media really diving into the Iraq war and how in their framing of it being so phony and for completely different reasons really affected my political consciousness, really kind of woke me up. And after that time period, you eventually find Zeitgeist, right? And then all of the conspiratorial stuff I've seen or heard or had whispers of, from Bill Clinton doing stuff in a back room to, people flying planes into towers to wars of economy and aggression. Then Zeitgeist comes and offers kind of an alternative explanation in its own way. Um, from it just being things happening to there actually being plans and objectives by groups of people that I know nothing about, kind of coming into view. And I went through a conspiratorial arc for a minute. I feel like right now it's a fad to be conspiratorial, but I remember the Alex Jones Prison Planet DVDs. I remember watching some of those. This was all underground. Nobody knew about it. Nobody cared
Yep.
about it. There were these freaking GeoCity websites and stuff out there where people had their radio show with the Matrix background saying "waking up," the red pill. This was all like early 2000s stuff before it turned into something else completely different. But I remember being there, listening to those radio shows and hearing these conspiracies and stuff. And then eventually being able to have enough knowledge to make the discernment between, like, obviously this is just bullshit, you know, and maybe there's some grains of truth here, taking news from a variety of sources and kind of synthesizing it. And I think a lot of that came from me working in the media industry. And then I had my own personal experiences in the media industry and seeing some stuff. And my political consciousness just kind of evolved from there, just becoming more and more seeking, I guess, clarity in all of this information. So I'm going to leave it at that. And you can tell me some highlights. I know I kind of detoured a bit, but I want to hear kind of, your story, at least some highlight points of how you got to you understanding the world now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to be succinct about it. Um, so yeah, I would say 17, 18, watch Zeitgeist. That kind of initiated like a journey of self-discovery for myself of all information, conspiratorial included. I went to college at UGA, go Dogs. I
Mm,
went to my major was international affairs, so I was learning about mainstream politics, geopolitics, and American foreign policy in school. And while the whole time also kind of pursuing my own search for truth um, during that time, and I got really into intelligence and security, and we learned a lot about how like the U.S. intelligence apparatus works, how we our sources and methods, and how we combat other nations. Um, and I really used the weapon systems that we were learning of other countries, and I took that analysis and turned it inward and started looking at American foreign policy and what do we do? And I realized I came to a realization a lot of our foreign policy, a lot of our domestic policy, in terms of warfare, is very similar to other countries, and arguably we're better at it.
Give me an
And that's
example.
what
Oh,
you
hold
got.
on, hold on. Give me an example.
For instance, like just like human intelligence and torture. Torturing people for information. Things
Hmm.
you think like America is better than, or we're the good guys. At least that's how we're taught in high school. But or we're peacekeepers. Yet we've been in a constant state of warfare since World War II. So a lot of these things, a lot of these internal truths you hold about your country, um, become very real, and you begin to have a more realistic perception of the nation. Um, and then from there, I graduated, and I started working for a former CIA case officer. His name was Robert David Steele. He was featured on Alex Jones a couple times.
Hmm.
And I worked for Cynthia McKinney. She's a former congresswoman in Georgia, and I worked with them for like I think 4 months. They were a fountain of information. They were, I would call them, intellectual juggernauts, just extremely well versed, just aged minds in politics who, they were just, I was grateful to work with them. And from there, um, at this point, I began to refine my worldview, and I would say my deep dive in conspiracy, my understanding intelligence, military, and I would say elite social society really warped my worldview
Hmm.
to the point where it's very difficult for me to relate and or talk to people about politics who are not well versed themselves. And it's very simple. It's a very a simple analogy is you, you said you used to work in news reporting.
Hmm.
There's a lingo, there's a vernacular, there's a culture in there. And when you talk to someone outside, you try to explain it to them, you got to break everything down to little elementary sized bites. And that's how I felt talking with the general public. And so it's very rare that I go into like a deep dive in politics because so few people take the time to inform themselves. Um, and I think personal responsibility is everybody should have a sense of personal responsibility in informing and educating themselves.
Interesting. So, do you think that? Well, I mean, let me just, I guess, posit it this way. Um, we have these intelligence agencies and these institutions out there because it is not possible for everybody to be informed.
Are you asking me, is it possible?
No, what I'm saying, I'm making more of a declarative statement here and see if you agree with it. And what I'm saying is that the reason why we have these institutions like the CIA, other intelligence agencies, and the reason why we are maybe even good at or better at some um, military tactics than other nations that we disparage. The reason for all this is because we've delegated that power to those institutions to do that stuff because we as a citizen body can't digest that information. Um, can't all be aware of its impact and its importance. For instance, like if you're living in some poor part of some state, barely scraping by, how much time do you have to understand like geopolitics and um I don't know, the use cases maybe of waterboarding? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I get what you're saying. I think uh, everybody who has access to the internet has the ability to inform themselves. If they're in a state of survival, you know what I mean? Eating comes before learning about the world. I get it. If you're struggling, your parents are struggling, I get it. I think everybody has the competency to inform themselves. And I don't think everybody needs to have to go in such depth the way I did. It was very obsessive and consumed my life.
Hmm.
Um, but to use an analogy of a car, in developing your worldview is very similar to driving a car. You can know how to drive a car without understanding every piece and every mechanic under the hood.
True.
So you can have a worldview that's functioning without understanding all the nitty gritty. But I do think there's a level of blissful ignorance and a lack of personal responsibility, not wanting to learn. And I use the phrase secondhand thinkers. People just want to be told what to believe. And it's easier.
Hmm.
It's easier. I get it.
100%. I think that's true, and I think that, but that's also part of the reasons why you have institutions. I'm a big institutionalist. I'm a big person to where I believe that because of whether it's the inability or just the lack of wanting to understand the world, regardless of the reasons, there are a lot of people out here who are not informed, and like you said, they're looking for somebody to just tell them what to believe. Well, if that's the case on the ground, if that's true of about our reality, there will always be more people who cannot digest the reasons for some activities of a powerful body like a government. If that's true, then we should have institutions designed to focus in on that stuff, and frankly to do it for the people, to do it for whatever body they're governing. It's like not everybody can be a heart surgeon. That's why we specialize and have people know how to do that stuff, and they know all of the quote unquote boring or the nuances and the complexities of that field that an average person, maybe they could benefit by knowing that stuff, but um, most of the time, I guess there's not, and so we leave it to the professionals.
I agree with you partially. Um, I don't think I would not describe myself as an institutionalist. I understand the need for specialization, but I would argue that the ignorance of the average person is a military goal. The goal is to keep the population ignorant and subservient so that they are unable to organize and collectively act to stand against any immoral actions taken by the government. And that's one thing that really caught me by surprise is the U.S. citizenry, the U.S. population is a military target, is
Hmm.
a military objective. The ability to control and influence the public perception on events, on current events, historical events, is a military objective, and that's so. So I would say you know, people are partially to blame. It is your responsibility. However, you do have this, you know, multi-billion-dollar industry uh, tailoring a world to keep you ignorant as well.
What if there was no body paying that money at all? Like, well, okay, well, actually, let me move a bit back further here. So, is could it be true that the natural state of things without any influence, without any organized body of people trying to influence another group of people? Could it be true that the natural state of large groups is ignorance
No,
in various like capacities?
yeah, I would say to to to, to kind of reduce it to like a very simplified form. I mean, in a small culture, a small community, everybody plays a role, and everybody contributes. The issue I would say as it relates to our society is that we elect and we delegate our personal responsibility to others
But why do
rather
we do
than,
that?
well, I would say the way our political system has evolved required that in terms of voting logistically. But now in the world of technology, it's not necessary.
So, okay. So you think that everybody could be educated about their system of government and what's important, um, at least from their level, sufficiently. Like there can be that we can have a world with um, not zero ignorance, but low ignorance to the point where things function a lot better.
Agreed. And I think that can be achieved very quickly.
Why? Or, well, what's the thing preventing us from achieving it quickly, in your opinion?
Uh, Willful ignorance, one, and I would say a constant state of pleasure seeking and distraction, and then I would say third, fear. Unfortunately, the world is a dark place. I would say reality is stranger than fiction. And we live in a world where a lot of crazy things happen, and you see it in movies. And to imagine that something like that takes place in real life is too much for some people to fathom. But I would argue those are the three main reasons.
Okay, but the very fact that you say that is too much for people to fathom, I mean, isn't that evidence of it not being so easy to um, have a majority of people be aware and properly informed on these issues of like society and governance? To put it another way is that, I mean, if it was so easy, why isn't it already done? You know, like if we can do this so quickly, then that kind of suggests that we can kind of do it easily, but yet people are still distracted, people are still afraid, people are still a gluttony to like entertainment and low and shallow entertainment. um
Correct.
we still have we haven't done these things. To me, that would suggest that it's very hard to get people to not be ignorant to a sufficient level about government, about the things in our world and society. Coming to terms with the dark things that we are doing out in the world, and realizing why it's happening. Like,
You are. I would like to rephrase. You're correct. I would not describe it as easy. I think it's solvable and it can be done. But the act of going from uninformed, unaware to aware and informed is not easy. However, I don't think it's impossible. And I think realistically, in terms of logistics, all you would need is maybe 30 hours, 30 hours of time to consume information in a structured manner. I think it can be done.
but think about it, Ivan. There's people right now who, soon as you would say something like in a structured manner, they immediately think, oh, the government's going to come and tell me what to think, what to do. I'm going to do my own research forever, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wouldn't want to task the government with teaching the citizens. I think to use the Zeitgeist documentary, for example, that
Hmm.
was a 2-hour documentary that was able to hit on multiple points, multiple soft points in society, not just politics and government, but international relations, monetary policy, where money comes from, religion, socioeconomic. It hit on a lot of topics. So it's not just political and geopolitical awareness. I think there's also a level of like psychology, sociology. There's a lot that goes into it.
I mean, yeah, true. There is a lot that goes into it. How about this? from your experience dealing with people who've been interfacing or interacting with these institutions we're talking about, CIAs and different offices of the executive and of the government, um, you've dealt with people who worked in those places or have been associated with those places. What is one thing that you feel like you've seen or learned from those people that you wish the majority of people would understand and see? Like, if this thing you learned, you wish you could spread it to the masses.
Yeah, I would say from my experience, 97%, and this is just rough numbers, 97% of people who work in government are good people. They are working, they are feeding their kids, they're pursuing a career, they're trying to have a life like you and me and have a happy family and go on vacations. Their intentions and their hearts are good and positive. It is a 3% and mostly leadership that is corrupted in almost every organization and every agency that influence the whole direction of the organization. Um, and to reference Cynthia McKinney and David Steele, who I worked with, when they were working for government, they drank the Kool-Aid. They believed everything 100%. It wasn't until they left their office or left their job and pursued something else that they began to see in retrospect what they were a part of and how their worldviews changed. And when you're in it, it's very hard to resist and not assimilate to the work culture that you're in.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that would be the main point. Is that the most people are good. There's a couple bad apples that are in leadership that ruin it for everyone.
Okay. So I mean, you know this, you understand this, and you feel like the majority of people out there in the world, the average citizen probably doesn't. The average citizen probably assumes that, like, the opposite of what you just described. It's, there's a bunch of, like, most of the people are corrupt. They all have agendas. They're already rich. They're just trying to line their pockets with more money, and they're complicit with, like, evil leadership, if anything. Um,
Correct.
where do they get these ideas from?
Um, where did I get these ideas from?
No, where if we're assuming that the average person thinks the worst about the people inside of institutions, where are they getting that idea from? Where are they getting the idea that these people in these institutions have the worst intentions?
Well, I don't think the average person has that. You asked me if I could share, one piece of insight that I've learned from these people.
I know, yeah,
That
yeah.
would be the
Okay, so well, do you believe that most people feel like these institutions have the worst people, like the opposite of
yes.
what you
I
just
think
described? Okay, so
I
if you
think the
feel that
average.
way, 1 second. So if you feel that way, that the average citizen feels bad, feels like these people have the worst intentions. Where did they get that idea from?
I think it's a generalization. For instance, it's a kind of like a they them. I think the average person who thinks the government is corrupt, they just say the government, everybody in the government, without it's kind of being like indiscriminate, like in everybody. When in reality it's not. It's a few bad apples. And it's easy to make generalizations like that, and I totally get it.
But where does it come from? Where does it come from, Ivan? Where does a generalization come from? Why isn't it that the assumption is they are doing the best they can? They aren't trying to exploit the system they're in. Why is it the where is that idea coming from?
Well, I think it comes from a general mistrust of the government, and it's not unique to the United States.
Mm. I mean,
I mean, if you look at history, the organization that has killed the most people in history since the beginning of human history is government. It's government of countries. It's not terrorist organizations. It's not corporations. It's governments making decisions that have led to the deaths of most people in the world.
Well, even more baseline. It's not just governments. It's collective centralized power, right? It's groups of
Correct.
people with power, and the more groups, the bigger the group, and the more power they have, the more people assume that they're probably up to no good. They're somebody's going to get hurt. You got to watch out for them. You got to be wary, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's a default assumption, then I'm about to wrap back around to something I said a little bit earlier, or something I maybe implied. I was kind of implying that it's the what if there is a certain innate human behavior that makes people make these broad assumptions, and that human behavior is more selected for than it is not, as in more there's always going to be a bit more people out there who's going to see the groups of people assume they have power with bad intention. They're going to, more people's going to see that than than less people, I guess. So if that's the case, um then we should, I guess, understand that if that's the baseline of how humans operate, then we should, what am I trying to get to here? We should operate knowing that that's true. We should design our systems, our government systems, with that in mind, right? That there's going to be a large group of people out here who's going to be ignorant of the facts and assume the worst, but we still got to get shit done. It's kind of what I'm saying here. And isn't that kind of how we operate already? Like, isn't the CIA, isn't these institutions out here woefully aware that people assume the worst? But no, they still got to go ahead and get shit done. And so, in order to make sure that they get the stuff they need done within this power system, they tell lies to the masses. They limit the information that they give the masses. Um, they maybe not lie to the masses, but present information in a redacted format so it's less impactful. Or maybe they don't elevate certain things that they're doing to the forefront. Like a good example is recently, um, there's been a bunch of talk, I feel like, in at least the social media sphere, about what is the Pentagon doing with all the money. They're never able to account for their entire budget. Well, what if it's
Yeah.
the case that that's intentional, right? Like, what if the public, what if the Pentagon and the government is deemed that the public doesn't can't know everything that they do with the every single tax dollar, because the public just wouldn't understand. You understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't justify the action. For the CIA or the defense budget, a lot of it is absconded, a lot of it is obfuscated, a lot of it is used for ill intent, for to create negativity around the world and to line pockets. And I think that's the business as usual. And like I said in the beginning, I think to kind of go with the kind of the train of thought you're going in, the CIA and the military would view the American people as an enemy, as a population that needs to be um, undermined or satiated, so that they are not focusing on their actions.
Or, well, undermined or satiated. Those are some strong terms, man. I guess I feel like, what if it's the case that instead of satiated, we use a term that the average person just um doesn't have. Be quiet, Siri. But the average person just doesn't have the expertise and the bandwidth to be able to appropriately like process some of the things that are really going on out there in the wider world. You know.
That may be the case. However, the average person isn't stupid, and they are able to make a moral judgment. And when immorality takes place, it's very evident. And just like I mean, in retrospect, to use like the invasion of Afghanistan, we took a 21st century military might to a third world country, a bunch of people living in mountains and dirt, and for what? What did we gain? And the asymmetric warfare that took place was immoral. And there were a bunch of missions and nuances that took place inside of Iraq and Afghanistan that would be, um, I would say, embarrassing, or um, uh, it would show the immorality of those institutions.
I see what you're saying, and I kind of agree that, like, I mean, we do have evidence of at least, public facing like warfare turning out not being that good, right? Like,
Yeah. Do you
yeah,
remember when we
Afghan,
found the weapons of mass destruction?
yeah, I'm about to say, right, like the Iraq War, the Afghanistan,
But it's all
pretty.
wars. All wars since World War II are the same.
Why
Why,
since whoa,
why are
whoa.
we there?
Why since World War II? Why? I mean, I would say that all wars, it probably before then. I would say since probably the Revolutionary War, even prior, have always had blunders and awful things happening that wasn't moral, and yeah, I guess I don't agree with World War II being like the drawing line on that, but I see where you're coming from with
Well,
it.
I would say for me, World War II to present is the history I know best.
Mm,
So I am slightly biased in that way. Secondly, I think the majority of our world, our current geopolitical world, was reshaped at the end of World War II. I mean, of course, there are actions that took place prior to World War II that led up, and but majority of our world as it is has been the same since World War II. And like all the new boundaries of countries, all the international organizations, all the new countries that were created, all that happened after World War II.
hmm I agree. I agree with that. That yeah, the current world order, was birthed from that it was World War II was definitely the end of a certain chapter and the opening of a new one. So yeah, I agree with that. I think that I haven't really been playing devil's advocate, but I've been trying to kind of pose some questions to maybe suggest some different avenues to think about it. And I guess
Yeah,
I feel like overall that I mean, we've done some pretty immoral, things as a nation overseas. And you know, we've probably been the best at it um compared to some other nations and stuff. But I guess I feel like that's just because it's a matter of scale. Like when you have the most resources and the most power, I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing the most good and the most bad things. I mean, I would almost make that assumption that with great power becomes great responsibility, and over time there will be missteps, there will be immoral happenings within and around that power, and good things too. um like there has been all types of conflicts that the United States has supported over the years that if it didn't, it probably would have turned out worse because there were worse actors out there on stage. um I'm thinking of like what Kosovo, um, genocides being taken in other third world nations that we've quelled, and what Joseph Kony out of Africa, that guy.
Yeah, I
Um,
think most conflicts from World War II to present were instigated by world powers in third world countries. I don't think many
really,
wars or conflicts happen naturally. They're instigation and redistribution of resources.
I agree with that. That there is you know there's a large fight over resources at the end of the day, and who gets those resources. Mainly, oil, lithium, um, these finite resources, or resources that's very expensive to dredge out, or they're located in certain areas that is not, it's not widely dispersed. You have to go to a certain area to find it. So yeah, I agree with that. But you said that you think that a lot of these things that have happened since World War II, these conflicts, have been instigated by third world like actors.
No, they've been instigated by first world countries
First world, okay,
in
gotcha.
third world countries.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, in third world countries. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about all the stuff that's happened in Central America, throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, South America, at least from the U.S.'s
Correct.
part. But there's been,
There's
other
also
countries,
been Africa,
Africa.
with France, Denmark,
Yep.
the UK, Russia, all the
Russia. Yep.
larger powers in the world do it. It's not unique to the United States.
Yes. Those aren't unique to the United States. So that brings me to at least the question of if if a lot of if the majority of powers are operating in this way, and you are a power, you know that if you don't operate in a similar way, you then would be um prey to these predators. Then what can you do? You know, um, doesn't governing, at least in today's world, post World War II world, require a lot of immoral activities, such as such as satiating an ignorant population, an internal population that wouldn't understand um, why a nation would go do such a thing in a third world country.
No, I don't think it's required.
Mm.
I think you could be independent, self-reliant, and defend all of your borders while acting and behaving morally without exploiting others.
You think so? Maybe that's what
Yeah.
we're. Bro, I feel like maybe I've just seen too much. I feel like maybe um too many Alex Jones videos or something. I don't know. But I feel like, excuse me. But I feel like there is enough quote unquote powerful bad actors out there in the world where if you occupy a space and you shrink that space and defend like the core territory and leave an open vacuum around you, in this kind of metaphor I'm kind of drawing, these other powers will come and take up that space. Like if you are
Agreed.
not yeah, if you are not being a predator yourself, you will be the prey. It feels like on a lot of different levels there is some zero sum activity and stuff going on that's pressing countries like the United States, whatever, Russia, China, you name them, to act in immoral manners, and it's almost inescapable. It's hard for me to believe that there is currently, in the foreseeable future, a way for countries like the United States, China, Russia, France, all these first world countries to act in moral ways and retain um, their structure without being gobbled up by other actors around them over some time. You don't feel that pressure. You don't.
No, I hear what you're saying. I don't think there would be to go to your metaphor of like reducing your resources to a smaller position. You don't have to do that. I think I had this conversation with a coworker not too long ago. Um, we could, the United States could stay the same exact size, and we could maintain our borders, and the quality of all citizens could improve. I think the fundamental problem with our society in the United States and globally is fundamentally distribution of resources. I think that is our. If that one problem can be fixed, literally the world is fixed.
How do you imagine we solve the resource problem, the scarcity issue?
I don't think we live in scarcity. I think we live in abundance. Living in the United States, I certainly feel like I live in abundance. I think the issue is distribution of resources. We have 1% globally who own 40% of all the resources globally. Now, how do you redistribute that from the 1%? That's a deep conversation. You know what I mean? But I think that is the
Yeah, hold on.
greatest.
Hold on. Yeah, let's stop there real quick, because that is the crux. Can that even be done? It almost feels like part of the human experience is to desiring justice to be sought out in the redistribution. I feel like in this hypothetical world, it, humans won't let it be enough that let's let's say these powers, they redistribute all of the resources. Scarcity, abundance is the majority of the population. Let's say that's true. I feel like there will still be a large portion of the people who did not have prior to that redistribution. A large would still feel slighted, and that justice needs to be served. The fact that I have what I need now is not enough. You need to be punished for the things that we did not have back then. It feels like
I agree.
yeah.
I do think the sense of justice is strong in people. Um, it's not my judgment to make as to what happens to the 1%. I would chalk it up, to
Yeah.
as much as they reap what they sow. And like they know what they've done, and what goes around comes around. I would not attack them. I would not kill someone, but uh, the living in a world of abundance, if the redistribution were to take place, the people today, with the mindset and the worldview of today, could not inhabit a world of abundance. It would be the children and future generations born into abundance that would be able to be the people who would be able to manage that kind of uh, global distribution of wealth.
How would you say that happens though? Where does the transition point occur? It feels like like generationally, I mean, even generationally, we are being taught, stuff from our forefathers that we are now carrying into the future, and like, how is one born into abundance and not plagued by, um, everything that came before?
Well, you'd have to learn what came before. I mean, there would be this period of, imagine fast forwarding 100 years into the future into this world of abundance where there was a time where people didn't eat. There was a time where people would die because they didn't have access to hospitals. Why? There was enough food in hospitals for everyone, but there was a small group of people that had the majority of everything. And I think the immorality and illogical structure of society will be very evident in the future in this hypothetical. Um,
Okay. I feel like do you have like 10 more minutes?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I want to play around in this for a second. I feel like we're still dodging the big point here, at least in this part, is where how does it happen? How does the transition from somebody from generations going into abundance, or the uh, understanding that they have everything they need and not resenting their forefathers in the past and trying to exact justice. How where does that transition happen? I guess, are you suggesting that it just happens gradually? Just every generation, like a
Yeah,
hundred generations later, the memory
yeah,
has
I think
eroded enough to where people aren't operating like we are doing now, like fundamentally.
yeah, I think it would really only take one generation, 20 years.
Really?
However, and I would say the transition would be very similar to race relations in the United States. Going from slaves to free people. I mean, I don't have any animosity towards white people today for shit that took place back then. I recognize the strife and the hardship of slavery. I recognize the civil rights movement and how the transition took place, but I don't feel any kind of way about it now.
But wait, hold on. No, no, we have to back up on that because you in your life, yeah, you may feel that way, but slavery, or like the big transition point that happened, was, I would say, the Civil War. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of that event now, 100 and something years ago, today. I don't see how, and you may be okay, with certain the way race relations have played out in the United States, at least. But as we both know, there's a bunch of people out here of all different races who's not okay and are still dealing with these issues. Um,
Well, I think racism, and this is gonna be very controversial. I think racism is normal. You go to Asia, people are racist. You go
this is
to
true.
Africa, people are racist. You like, for instance, use Japan for example. Me and you can move to Japan, live there for 50 years, die old men, and never be considered Japanese.
Yes.
There's nothing we could do. We would never be accepted. We could do that in America. And so when you zoom out for just for a moment, you begin to realize that one, racism is very normal on Earth, and two, racism, the lack of it is wonderful in the United States. And the United States is one of the few places where we are truly a melting pot. So much so
Hmm.
that your expectation of all races is American. For
True.
instance, and this
That's a really
happened
good
for this
point.
happened for this happened for me when I traveled abroad. I was in Colombia. I was at a Chinese restaurant, and I went to go order, and I just assumed they spoke English because they were Asian people in Colombia,
Mm.
but they didn't.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, I'm like, they look like they speak English, but the reality is that I'm just around so many diverse people that look like these people, but we're all the same. And it's really, I mean, living in America is fucking awesome. It's awesome.
You're absolutely right. Like, you're 1,000% right that um in the United States, Americans are super entitled when we think about how other people even think about race. Like, yeah, the mindset of, like you said, someone in Japan thinking about race is completely different than, as Americans, what we would think of race. And so I agree with that. That, in a way, quote unquote racism um is kind of global in our species, in a way in which we kind of seem to naturally um apply our pattern recognition senses to the way people look. You're like, all right, I know these people kind of look like me, have a culture attached to me, and these people over here don't look like me, don't have a similar culture to me, and we highlight that in our brains. We carry that with us. We collectively create stories around the otherness
Yeah,
of people. This has been something that has been with our species forever. I mean, there's a reason why now. this may be conspiratorial. There's no facts to back this up, but there's a reason why Homo sapiens are around, and all of these other species of humans that used to be around are no longer here. You know, I would say that wild conjecture here, but if somehow we can hop in a time machine and go back, I think even early Homo sapiens that coexisted with Neanderthals and Homo erectus and stuff, there was quite a bit of speciesisms and racisms going on there too. I think that's been it's pretty deeply ingrained, and probably within mammals too. Now, once again, I'm no scientist. I'm no, I could become 100% wrong, but I don't think I am. But I think that we're tapping on something true here with that. And so, yeah, like racism in its own way, it's kind of maybe fundamental to the human experience, the human species experience here on this planet. And it is a bit entitled to think that our experiences in the United States with race translates to all humans on this planet's experience with race. But I still do feel like this all came from, really, at least for me, is when you said that the change can happen in a generation. Like, maybe there is a way for us to, as a species, I think that's pretty much what we're looking for in the United States, in a multicultural country, is recognizing people's differences and respecting them. Not feeling that a different race or somebody needs to be subjugated under another because they're superior in some way. And like, you go to Japan now and talk with those people who are like, I don't care if, Black Brent living down the road, he's never Japanese. But if you ask them why, I don't think they're going to say it's, well, actually Brent needs to be a slave to me too, because the Japanese are superior and they need to work. I don't think you ask a modern day Japanese person that like, that's the connect. I think it's more of like, this person here hasn't lived their entire life with all of the shared experiences of being a Japanese person. There's just going to be things that they're not going to be able to relate to in a granular way.
Agreed.
But all right, I think that's about it. It's getting late here. I think that's a good note to leave it off on. Man, we trafficked through some topics. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about more of before we adjourn? Wrap this up.
Not really, man. I really appreciate you having me on. I enjoy talking about politics, religion, pop culture, whatever, really. And I feel like there's very rarely a safe place in the real world to be genuine and honest, and you don't have to censor yourself. And it's really nice to have a place to do that. I would like to foster a community or the spirit of that. And I really appreciate you doing this. I'm really glad you're running the podcast. I'm really glad you allowed me to come on. And if you wanted to get together in the future and dive into more topics, I would love to do that as well.
We'll do it. We'll actually maybe set an agenda next time. We'll stick to one topic. But I felt like this was a good, freewheeling conversation. And thanks, Ivan. Really appreciate it. We're going to do it again. But we're out.
All right, man. You have a good night.